Hello everybody, this is Connor, BoatsDon'tSink, here with another Shadowverse Evolve deck profile. Today we're going to be looking at the Pixie Forestcraft deck, updated with BP16 New World Genesis cards. If you purchased the recently released Showdown deck for Forestcraft, this is going to be sort of the natural upgrade progression for the deck. You'll use a lot of the cards that were already in there, alongside just a handful of the new cards from BP16 and a couple other upgrades that we can use to really buff up the deck. As always, reminder that this is meant to be a starting point list. This is obviously an upgrade to the Showdown deck, but that still does not mean it's optimized for every scenario. These decks still have a handful of different options you can play, some stuff to mess around with that might be better for one meta versus another. So please feel free to make changes as you find necessary to end up on a list that you're happy with. Taking a look at the deck here, you will notice, of course, we're playing a lot of the cards that were in that Showdown deck. We have the Amataz, the Aria Miasma Fairies, the Cynthias, Fairy Sluggers, Blessed Fairy Dancers, all that good stuff. We are playing a pretty good number of cards from set 15 and set 16 that would be past sort of the Showdown deck's release timeline. A lot of legendaries in this deck, kind of just something that incidentally ends up happening with the Fairy deck, with how much support it's gotten recently. But pretty low curve. We're playing 30 of our cards cost 1 or 2, so really low to the ground. It's going to make it hopefully a lot easier to be mulliganing for like playable hands in a deck like this. Obviously the Fairy deck, as it has always been, is going to need to find both Fairy generators and ways to buff all the different Pixie tokens so that you can really get a lot of value out of them. But the more cards we get, the more redundancy we get that's going to help with that. So 31 followers, 7 spells, 2 amulets. One thing you'll notice is we are actually finally able to cut cards like Fairy Circle. In set 16 specifically, getting 2 new 1-drop followers that both generate fairy tokens has really helped out with sort of not just having like do nothing spells to generate our tokens. They're not going to give us as many as Fairy Circle on its own would, but being bodies that we can get down and start attacking with a little earlier make them higher value in general. So taking a look at some of these cards individually. First up, we have Aria, Lady of the Woods. So this is our new legendary from set 16. That's a 1-cost 1/1 fanfare. You put 2 fairy tokens into your EX area. So this is essentially almost Fairy Circle on its own. Instead of getting 3 fairy tokens in EX area, you're getting 2 in the EX area and a 1/1 on your board. While it's not a token, so it's not going to benefit from like all of the same buffs, it is still a 1/1 and you're just getting to start with it on board. So this is almost a strict upgrade to Fairy Circle just right out of the gate. But Aria does also evolve for 1 play point. It stays a 1/1 when it evolves. You don't get extra stats on that, but you do get to summon a fairy token, which is where your extra stats come from. So you now have 2/2 of stats on potentially turn 1 if you go second and use an Evo point here. And then if you decide to super evolve, so turn 6 or later going second, turn 7 or later going first, that's going to be our new mechanic introduced with both the Showdown decks and BP16. You give each Pixie token follower on your field and in your EX area +1/+1. So it's going to be all of your Fairy Wisp tokens and your Fairy tokens, all going to get +1/+1. So for only 1 play point plus an Evo point or 2 play points in the late game, this can be a very good way to sort of buff up a lot of bodies one last time before sending them up with like Amataz or Cynthia or something like that. Our next 1-drop is Good Fairy of the Pond. This is a 1-cost 2/1, so slightly more offensive stats here. Fanfare and Last Words, you're going to put a fairy token into your EX area. So again, you're getting 2 fairies off of this, plus a 2/1 body, very similar in overall rate to Fairy Circle, even giving you 4 attack stat total instead of just 3. It's just spread out in a little different manner. And of course you do have to get last words, so banish effects are going to be a little unfortunate here, but you're still getting a 2-1 and a 1-1 immediately. 1-1 in EX area, obviously, but still good amounts of stats for 1 play point very early in the game. These 2 new followers are going to be really big help in just the deck getting set up a little faster, sort of coming out of the gate swinging a little better compared to what it had before. The other spell that we're playing, this is from set 12, so this is our next best way, really, to be making fairy tokens early. As a 1-cost spell, Intertwined Resolve. This spell has 2 modes, however, we're never going to be using the first one. It does require Natura cards, and we play no Natura cards, so never going to be using option 1 here. But option 2 is to summon 2 fairy tokens straight to our board. So this is 2/2 of stats for 1 play point. It is essentially Goblin stat line, except we're getting them in multiple separate bodies. So big thing here between this giving us 2 bodies and Aria giving us potentially 2 bodies if we Evo point, and Good Fairy of the Pond, all these just being a lot of bodies on board turn 1, something that we did not previously have when we were just playing Spirit Shine and Fairy Circle. We get a lot of ways to buff multiple bodies for a lot of stats really quick. So making 2 1-1s with this, in a lot of decks, that's not really going to be much different from having a 2/2. But when you're giving +1/+1 to each of your followers, now instead of just +1/+1, that's +2/+2. So we have curves where you're potentially going turn 1 Aria Evo, turn 2 Blessed Fairy Dancer, you have 4/4 of stats that you can attack with on turn 2. Intertwined Resolve into Blessed Fairy Dancer or Titania's Sanctuary, you have 4/4 of stats that you can attack with on turn 2, which is just very aggressive and very hard for a lot of decks to keep up with, especially in the Blessed Fairy Dancer case. It's 4/4 you can attack with, but you have 6/7 of stats total that you've put on board as of turn 2, potentially going first, which is just a lot. Decks aren't going to be able to keep up with that, and it can often put you in a winning position, you know, as early as the 2nd turn of the game. Your opponent has had a chance to spend 1 play point, and they're already, you know, super far behind, trying to figure out a way to claw back in. Just hoping that, like, a double aim or, like, Gilnelise or something can clear 2 bodies, and they only have to take 2 more damage on the next turn. But, like, they're still at 14 going into their 3rd turn, and you get to play more cards. Very good aggressive openers that these cards are going to enable. Nature's Guidance. A little bit of a departure from what the other cards do here, but still a good card. Still Forestcraft staple. Not as important here as it is in the combo decks for allowing us to, like, replay cards in the same turn. But select a card on your field, return it to owner's hand, and draw a card. This can be used with things like Blessed Fairy Dancer and Amataz to reuse their fanfare effects or activated abilities, just to buff your board, you know, an extra time for that, spending that 1 extra play point to pick them up. To get to use their effects again, get extra stats on your board. In Amataz's case, you can do things like playing him, engage him to give 2 things Storm, and then pick him up so that you can do it again on the following turn. Did you get, like, multiple turns of back-to-back Storm pushes? You can also even use this with, like, the Amulet, Titania's Sanctuary, just so that it's not clogging up some of your board space after you use it to buff your board. Whether you know, play it back down to buff your board again, or just hold it in hand because you would rather go a bit wider and have access to the board space. So a lot of various use cases, not super critical to the strategy, but lets you get some extra value out of the cards that are already good otherwise. The last 1 cost we have is Spirit Shine. This is the set 6 spell that gives us fairy tokens. So we're still playing this one over Fairy Circle. It only gives us 2 fairy tokens into EX area if we choose that mode. But it has the option 1 of select a Pixie token on your field or in your EX area and give it +2/+2. So this allows us to buff like a fairy up to a 3/3. or even higher. If we have just one extra play point sitting around, we can use this just for extra stats. Or on a like big push turn, if we already have a fairy that we're like giving storm or something, we can just get immediate damage value out of Spirit Shine. And then of course, otherwise, you know, say you open this opening hand, it's your turn 1 play, you can at least get 2 fairy tokens into your EX area. It's clearly not as good as any of the other 3 ways we have to make fairy tokens for 1 play point, but it is our sort of just extra little redundancy. It's the 10th and 11th ways to make fairy tokens on turn 1. So with 11 ways to get them on turn 1, we should almost always, you know, have something to do straight out of the gate. Moving into 2-drops. First up, we have Amata's Fairy Blader. So this is the set 6 legendary. This is present in the Showdown deck. Very, very important card to the strategy here. 2 cost 2/2. Fanfare, put a fairy token into your EX area. Give each pixie follower in your EX area +1/+1. So notably, this says pixie follower in your EX area. Not going to come up much since it only references EX area, but this is not just going to buff your fairies and fairy wisps. If you do, you know, happen to play like Spinaria Wavering Will to get something from Cemetery into EX area, you can sequence your plays in a way that you can actually buff some of the things you can potentially get off of her. Things like Fairy Slugger, things like the 1-drop Aria or 1-drop the Pond Fairy. So like, and his ability, notably also, his activated ability selects up to 2 pixie followers that cost 1 or less on your field and give them Storm. Also does not reference tokens. So you could do things like Spinaria, get potentially Good Fairy of the Pond, and then play Amataz to buff the Good Fairy of the Pond while it's in your EX area. Then push it up for 0 off of Spinaria effect. Use Amataz to give it Storm, and even if you didn't have an extra token sitting in your EX area immediately, you're able to sort of sequence things in a way where you now have a 3/2 Storm Good Fairy of the Pond, which is kind of cool. So always something to keep in mind, lots of different ways to sort of sequence Amataz. And then obviously we're trying to use this to give Storm to our biggest fairy tokens possible over and over again, using things like the Nature's Guidance potentially to loop him multiple turns in a row, and just keep lots of aggressive damage pushes on our opponent. Next up, we play the other Amataz, the set 15 Amataz. This is Amataz Reverse Blader. This one is not in the Showdown deck. This is a relatively new card. Not in set 16, but in our other most recent release, the 14-15 combined set. He has a 2-cost 2/2 ward that evolves for 1 play point into a 3/3 ward. On evolve, you select an enemy follower on the field, and if there are at least 3 cards in your EX area, destroy it. If there are at least 3 pixie cards, deal 2 damage to its leader. So 3 cards, pretty easy to get. With all of our ways to make fairies, as long as you're not spending them faster than you can make them, Amataz should almost always just be one of the best 2+1 removal effects in the game. A lot of times these just deal 2 damage and scale up to 4 later in the game. This one, however, just destroys outright. So very powerful, really good at answering just big threats. And even as the game goes on later, it should be pretty easy to have 3 due to Aria Miasma Fairy going to your EX area on its own. Just sort of being a permanent 1, so you only need 2 other pixie cards in your EX area. Everything that's going to go to our EX area pretty much is a pixie trait in this deck. So if you're meeting the 3 condition, you'll also meet the condition for 2 damage to leader. Which, extra chip damage, that's going to help throughout the game as well. But we have so many ways to just put 2 in EX area off of a single card. So the 1-cost Aria, Spirit Shine, Good Fairy of the Pond, not going to do it immediately, but it is a 1-cost that generates 2 in EX area. So lots of ways to just very easily fulfill this condition. Our next 2-drop, set 1 card, Blessed Fairy Dancer in the Showdown deck for sure. This is our best way to just buff all of our tokens. And again, importantly, doesn't just buff tokens. So this is a 2-cost 2/3 Fanfare. Give +1/+1 to each other Pixie follower on your field and in your EX area. This potentially representing like 9/9 of stats just out of nowhere is ridiculous. I'm not sure when they printed this in set 1 if they really had eyes on the direction that this deck was going to end up going, 15 sets later. But this is just a really good turn 2 play, really good mid to late game play to set up your storm turns. Being able to buff like almost all of our turn 1 plays is, again, just how this deck can be very aggressive and come out of the gates swinging with as much as 4 damage on turn 2. It can make our 1-drops harder to not just better offensive threats, but buffing defense makes them harder to remove defensively. Giving these guys all 2 defense makes them, immune to the opponent just paying 3 to play Apollo, deal 1 to everything, not be able to evolve it. Depending on how early in the game you can set this up. Things like Angelic Barrage, which doesn't see as much play, but any of these just 1 damage sweeper effects that could clear our board very easily become a lot less useful once we get to 2 defense. And if you're able to do things like, Blessed Fairy Dancer on 2, and if they can't answer it, turn 3 you can swing with it, Nature's Guidance, pick it up, replay it again, get some of these things to like 3 defense, lots of extra attack. Even if you're just buffing tokens that are sitting in your EX area, you're getting a lot of value out of just those extra stats. And as I said, into the mid and late game, this is really good at just setting up your big storm turns. Obviously, with Amataz and Cynthia being able to give storm, we just want the biggest bodies possible. So if you can just have like 2 fairies in your EX area that are getting up to like 4/4, 5/5 stats, you'll quite easily have turns where you can just one-shot your opponent off of them. We play 3 copies of Fairy Slugger. So this is another 2-cost 2/2 that just evolves for 1 play point. On Evo is a 3/3. You put a Fairy Wisp and Fairy Token into your EX area. Then if there are at least 3 Pixie followers in your EX area, give your leader +2 defense. Again, this just cares about Pixie followers, not tokens. So once we get Aria set up, this will be very easy to make live. It will in fact always be live, since Aria plus the Wisp and token that this makes are 3. So the healing here is quite nice. Obviously a 3/3 that gives you a 0-cost 1/1 is pretty good stats on its own for a 2+1. You get 4/4 of stats on turn 2 going second. But also just, helps set up the EX area, so you can follow this up with a good, like, Amataz play. Fairy Slugger into Amataz without Titania Sanctuary is, still 4 storm damage on the turn following your Fairy Slugger. You get 2 heal. Just very good for being a fast sort of setup card that transitions into payoffs very easily. There are some other 2-cost Evos now. Fairy Tamer, I believe, is the new set 16 2-cost Evo. I've chosen to go with Slugger here just because I think the healing is relevant. This is a deck that is not playing... This is essentially an aggro deck. It's like an aggro combo deck. It doesn't play as many sort of like mid-rangey tools that are going to help it stay in games a little longer. So getting that little extra healing just to sort of put ourselves on the upper hand against other aggro decks, or if we're playing with 4 extra life compared to them, that could be what we need to be able to, eke out a victory against some of them. The last 2-cost follower we play is Feybolt Archer. This is a 2-cost 2/1 Fanfare. Summon a fairy token straight to the board. So this is essentially a 2-cost 3/2 of stats. Look at the top 3 cards of your deck. You may reveal a Pixie card from among them and add it to your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. Really, we're just using this to find any of the important setup pieces we need, any of the ways to like buff our stuff. It's just consistency. Aria Miasma Fairy is really what we're looking for here. This card is very sort of crucial to our big payoffs. So being able to dig 3 extra cards for it, especially on curve, if you play this turn 2 to try to find the turn 3 or 4 Aria, quite helpful there. It sort of forgoes the aggressive open, but you know, if you open one way or the other, you can either play for the early aggression or just confirming the Aria so that you have the late game big storm pushes. Otherwise, it just replaces itself. So like, even if you're just playing this, you know, as a 3/2 of stats for 2 that draws a card to replace itself, you can find a lot of other useful cards that are going to, again, help you get set up, help you buff your board. Only adds Pixie, so you can't add Amataz or Cynthia or any of your actual finishers. So it's not going to get you the payoffs, but it is going to help you get extra setup. Our last 2 costs here are both amulets. So we have 1 copy of Titania's Sanctuary. Fanfare, give each Pixie token on your field +1/+1. So it's going to be your wisps and your fairies. And then while it's on your field, these Pixie tokens have a sail. So they can attack followers that are not engaged. Quite good if you're just, you know, have a bunch of extra fairies and need to use them as removal. To be able to trade into stuff your opponent plays before they engage it, sort of save you a little bit of life there. And whenever a Pixie token is put onto your field, give it +1/+1. So this essentially makes all of your tokens 2/2s for the rest of the game. The ones that are already in play will get the buff from the Fanfare, and then the ones that are not will get the buff once they enter. So making all of your tokens 2/2s for the rest of your game, you know, essentially doubles the stats of them, right? So you've doubled your potential damage output of your just like baseline tokens. Obviously less than double once you start giving them additional +1/+1s, but you know, if you're buffing the average card like twice, now you're buffing it 3 times. Makes it very easy to just get those like Storm for 4, Storm for 5 numbers that close out a game very fast. We do only play 1 of this because we don't really want to be spending the time to pay 2 for it. It is a bit slow to be doing that. However, the Evolve on Aria Miasma Fairy is going to summon this deck, this amulet straight from our deck. So ideally we're not drawing it, we just want it to sit in our deck. We can get it off of our Evo effect. That way we're not really wasting any time sort of paying 2 to get this effect into play. Worst case scenario, if you do draw it and have to pay 2 for it, it's not the end of the world. That's not a ton different from paying 2 for the Blessed Fairy Dancer. Obviously it doesn't have the 2/3 body, but you know, only slightly worse if you do have to do that. The other amulet, Tree of Wonders, we are essentially just playing this for the fail case of when we do draw Titania's Sanctuary, so that we still have something to search off of Aria. Fanfare, this puts a fairy token into the EX area, so still helping us progress there. And has activated ability, engage and bury this card to draw 2. Activate only if there are at least 3 Pixie followers in your EX area. If Aria is going to be one of them and the fairy that it itself makes is the second one, it should be quite easy to get a third one. So this is card advantage, and especially if you get this off of Aria, it turns Aria just into a free draw 2. So you're still getting something out of her, at least if you do draw the Titania's Sanctuary. Helps you sort of refill, find your pieces. Notably, since a lot of our other stuff is only going to really, Fabled Archer is only going to add Pixies off the top. This just drawing us raw cards can be one of our ways to help find Amataz and Cynthia. So, still a quite good card. Even if you do just hard draw this one and pay 2, you know, to get a fairy token and draw 2, not the end of the world. Not entirely something you want to be doing, but if you have to do it to dig for your win conditions, it is what it is. Now, our 3 drops. So Aria, Miasma Fairy, this is the cover card of the Showdown deck. Quite a big buff to the whole Pixie archetype. Maybe the biggest buff that they've gotten, I think. Outside of maybe, I mean, obviously Amataz and Cynthia were very big when they came out in sets 6 and 7, but this card giving us essentially permanent access to Titania Sanctuary is just huge. So 3 cost 3/3. Fanfare, put a fairy token into your EX area. So you're still getting tokens, you're not even losing out on that. While this card is on your field or in your EX area, each Pixie token follower on your field has Rush. So now all of our tokens, not only is Titania Sanctuary giving them a sail to be able to attack followers that are not engaged, Aria will give them Rush, so that, you know, Rush a sail on a bunch of 2/2s is maybe one of the best ways to just constantly answer whatever our opponent puts down if we have to. So in the situation where you're trying to save up for just the big Cynthia push, to sort of, you know, 10 your opponent in a turn, this is how you're answering their board and staying alive until you get to do that. You just have sort of infinite bodies to trade into whatever your opponent plays. And then last words, you can put this into the EX area. So you play it down, evo it, all that. Once your opponent kills it, you still have that rush effect permanently. It is going to eat up one of your EX area slots, so you can only have 4 of your tokens instead of 5. But the rush is worth it, and it's just a permanent card that's going to sit in your EX area to fulfill all of your 3 or more EX area conditions. The Evo costs 1 play point, turns it into a 4/4, and of course, search your deck for a Pixie Amulet that costs 2 or less, summon it, then shuffle. So this will get you either Titania Sanctuary is your higher priority, or Tree of Wonders if you've already drawn Sanctuary. So just free card advantage there either way, giving you a card, permanent stat buffs, or a token and some draw. Very good either way. We only play the 1 copy of the Evo because, you know, once you Evo it once to go get whichever one you're getting, you don't really care to Evo the second one. Titania Sanctuary is really just the highest priority here, so if you've already Evo'd 1 to get that, you're just not going to ever care about getting the other one. Spinaria, Wavering Will. This is the summer set Spinaria. 3 cost 1/3. Not Pixie, but still has some good synergies with the deck. So Fanfare, select a Forestcraft follower that costs 2 or less in your cemetery, put it into your EX area. It costs 2 less to play this turn. We have plenty of cost 2 followers we can get here that are quite good. Really, this is just going to be situational on what you want to get. If you need extra stats, you get Blessed Fairy Dancer. If you need to dig for some specific other cards, you get Feybolt Archer. I can't imagine what you're digging for that you can't just get off this already. But, you know, maybe you turn 2 Feybolt Archer, turn 3 use this to get Feybolt Archer back to just keep digging for Miasma Fairy. Fairy Slugger and Reverse Blader are Evos. They're going to synergize quite nicely with Spinaria's other ability. Whenever a follower on your field evolves, you get +2 defense. Again, just very good for outlasting other aggressive decks. Or you can use Spinny to get back set 6 Amataz to just immediately go like Spinny Amataz, push up a token, storm your opponent for like 6 or whatever. Very, very solid, you know, just like turn 5, turn 6 play. Get you, you know, 6 storm damage. Not a lot else going on there. Can be, you know, just real good. Keep up tempo, keep up pressuring your opponent. And of course, again, Reverse Blader and Fairy Slugger, also very high value cards to be just reanimating out of your cemetery. This is potentially, you know, turn 3 going second, turn 4 going first. You get to evolve them again. Utilize their effects. Heal 2, you're making a wide board. Amataz Reverse Blader specifically, this is why we play 3 copies of his Evo, and only 2 of a lot of the others, because being able to loop back that just unconditional destroy and deal 2 to the opponent is very powerful off of Spinaria. We play 3 copies of Pixie, Queen of Frost. This is a 4 cost 3/3. Fanfare, if there are at least 3 face-up evolved followers in your evolved deck, evolve this. So it's going to automatically evolve itself if we've got 3 face-up. This should be pretty easy by turn 4, or not turn 4, but by the time you're playing Pixie, really. Especially considering Aria is a 1/1. We have plenty of cheap followers that we can evolve. A lot of them are part of our game plan just as we're setting up. So Pixie should be online quite early. Whenever a follower on your field evolves, deal 1 damage to each enemy leader, 2 damage to each enemy follower on the field, and give your leader +1 defense. So more healing, more chip damage to our opponent, and this is quite a good way to clear wide boards, being able to deal 2 damage to each of your opponent's followers. Note, this does count herself. It is whenever any follower on your field evolves. So if you play her and she evolves, it'll trigger, and then since that's not activating an evolve ability, you can still evolve another follower in the same turn to potentially 2 your opponent, heal 2 for their board, which will clear a lot of stuff that you need to clear quite easily. If you don't have the 3 face up, you can pay 1 to evolve her just using her evolve ability. In that case, you won't be able to evolve again that turn, but yeah, her Evo is a 4/4. On evolve, search your deck for a follower that costs 2 or less. So again, we have plenty of options here, similar to Spinaria. We can use this to search Blessed Fairy Dancer, again, just to get extra buffs, Amataz to get the Storm set up, or we can use this to search Fairy Slugger or Reverse Blader, or even the 1-cost Aria, depending on what, sort of setup timeline looks like. The big thing here is being able to get something like Reverse Blader and play Pixie, she auto evos, you get Reverse Blader, play it, and then hard evo it. So you can destroy like one big thing while also dealing 4 to the rest of their board. If you picture cards like the set 6 Gensetsu, where they get like a 9 defense follower and then a bunch of 1/3s, that's normally quite difficult to clear. With this setup, you're able to clear that for 6 plus an Evo point, or 7 play points, which is about what it costs them to play the Gensetsu in the first place. You can full clear that while also dealing 2 to your opponent and healing 2. Or actually dealing 4 to your opponent and healing 2. So really good at just answering wide boards, sort of transitioning into your later turns of the game while you just wait for a couple extra play points to do like big Cynthia bursts and stuff like that. And again, you're chipping your opponent the whole time, so you're not only just staying alive, but also progressing your win condition of getting your opponent to 0 defense. And lastly, Cynthia, the Queen's Blade, 6-cost 4/6. A lot of lists are going to play 3 of this card. I'm only on 2. I think this deck has enough other early aggression and ways to get Storm off of like Amataz that you don't necessarily need 3. And this is certainly not a card that you want to be clogging your hand in the early game. Oftentimes, when you play the first Cynthia, it's going to end the game, so you don't need multiple of them sitting around. 6-cost 4/6, Fanfare, put a Fairy Wisp token into your EX area. One of our few ways to make Wisps in this deck, so that's the 0-cost token. And then give each Pixie token on your field +2 attack. While this card is on your field, each Pixie token on your field has a Storm and a Sail. And then whenever a Pixie token is put onto your field, give it +2 attack. So similar to Titania's Sanctuary, it'll give the buff to the things that already exist when it enters, and then everything else will get the buff as they enter. So essentially +2 attack to any of your Pixie tokens, which of course when combined with Titania's Sanctuary means that all of your tokens are just baseline 4/2, 4/2 Storm. So the Wisp that she generates can just, even if you play her on turn 6, can immediately come out and Storm for 4. But if you just wait 1 extra turn to have, 1 extra play point, now you can Storm for 8 or more by pushing up a Fairy. Or if you have Intertwined Resolve, playing Cynthia, pushing up the Wisp, and playing Intertwined Resolve is just instant 12 Storm damage for 7 play points, which, can just completely blow your opponent up. And then every extra play point you get being able to push up another Fairy. If you've been buffing them with things like Amataz and Blessed Fairy Dancer, you could very easily, 8 play points be sending for, 15 or more Storm damage without really having to put in a whole lot of effort there. So very much like sort of guaranteed way to close out the game, turn 7 or turn 8. If it's gone that long, if your, early aggression wasn't enough to end it before then. So yeah, here is the deck as a whole. Some of the pros you're looking at for this deck. again, very aggressive curve. 30 of your cards cost 2 or less, and it can go wide quite easily with all the tokens. So decks that are not prepared to answer wide boards are basically not really going to have any way to sort of deal with all the fairy tokens. You have a lot of storm damage. Only a couple sources that it's coming from, like it's mainly just the Amataz, but with Spinaria as a way to loop the Amatazes back, Fabled Archer and Piracy as ways to sort of dig for the Amatazes, and the ways to buff the tokens, you are storming for, 4, 6, 8 damage off of each of these Amataz. And then we have a lot of sources of redundancy and token generation. So one of the issues this deck always had in the past was sort of that your token generators were not tied to your win conditions. You had, generators and payoffs, and your generators on their own were not very good. So if you drew too many generators, no payoffs, you'd lose. If you drew too many payoffs, no generators, you'd lose. Now we're sort of getting to the point where, like, Aria and Good Fairy can both attack on their own. Aria can be a pump to your board, as well as being a generator. So it's sort of like Blessed Fairy Dancer plus Fairy Circle sort of tied up in one card. We're just getting better cards to fulfill these roles and sort of condense down a lot of our roles. So the deck's just getting sort of stronger and stronger with every new wave of support here. Some of the cons, however, it is quite reliant on Titania's Sanctuary for the permanent +1/+1, meaning the games that you do not draw 3-drop Aria, you're gonna be in a bit worse of a position. It is a lot of, potential damage you're gonna miss out on not having the amulet in play. And the other issue, your storm bodies have low defense and are weak to removal. There's not a lot of like control decks in the meta right now, but any deck playing cards like, Vengeful Radiance, Fire Chain, early game, depending on how your setup goes, things like Angelic Barrage or just other sweeper effects are going to give you some trouble. Quick timing spells are obviously going to make Storm difficult, since some of your effects only buff attack. Pushing with Cynthia, if your guys only have 2 defense, 3 defense, storming for 6 with them might not get through. You might lose out on ways to close out the game like that. You are also reliant on Storm really for closing out the game. You have burn damage with Reverse Blader and Piercy, but not enough to win the game on its own. So you're gonna have to find ways to like get through wards, stuff like that. Rush and Assail the Rush Assail effects should mean that you can just throw enough tokens at wards to get through sometimes, but getting through wards and being able to like push up enough extra guys to storm with Cynthia can be difficult to close out the game, so you do have to keep that in mind as well. Overall though, I think this deck is very powerful. Definitely, if you're looking at playing Forestcraft for the set 16 meta, this is one of your best options. It's finally, I think, to a point that maybe I would consider playing this deck. I've always had issues with sort of the draw the wrong half of your deck and don't do enough, but I think this deck is certainly getting to the point where almost all of your games you should be doing your game plan, having a good time just making tokens and blowing up your opponent. So yeah, as always, if you want to check out the deck log page for this, I've got the code in the bottom right. That is 1EANR. I'll also have a link to the deck log in the description. Otherwise, thank you for watching. I know it's been a minute since I've gotten some deck profiles up. I've got plenty of them scheduled already in the works for set 16 and some other cool stuff on the way. We'll be doing standard and crosscraft moving forward. It might be a minute before some crosscraft stuff starts popping up just because we don't have events for that until Summerfest starts. But yeah, a lot of cool stuff on the way. Thanks for watching. Until then, there should be some videos on your screen for you to check out, and I will see you next time.